We are going to start with some instructions on the translation so that you can then join the translation. So I will pass on the word to our translators.
Simultaneous interpretation on Zoom. PC version, step 1. In the menu below, select the interpretation feature. Step 2. Select the language you wish to listen to during the meeting. This language must be the same one you will speak in. Note, if you wish to switch languages, just go to the interpretation feature and select another one. Keep in mind that when you change the language, you will no longer hear the previous one. Note, the Zoom app must have been previously downloaded to have the interpretation option available.
Thank you.
Interpretación simultánea en Zoom, versión PC, paso 1. En la barra inferior habrá una nueva opción de interpretación, hay que dar clic en ella. Paso 2. Hay que seleccionar el idioma en el que deseas escuchar la reunión. Este debe ser el mismo idioma en el que hablarás. Nota, si en algún momento deseas cambiar de idioma, solo debes ingresar a Interpretación y elegir el otro idioma. Recuerda que al cambiar de idioma ya no escucharás el anterior. Nota, se debe haber descargado previamente la aplicación Zoom para tener disponible la opción de interpretación.
Gracias.
Interpretação simultânea no Zoom, versão para PC. Passo 1, no menu abaixo, selecione a função Interpretação. Passo 2, selecione o idioma que você deseja ouvir durante a reunião. Esse idioma deve ser o mesmo em que você vai falar. Observação: se você desejar trocar de idioma, basta selecionar o recurso Interpretação e escolher outro. Tenha em mente que quando você mudar o idioma, você não ouvirá mais o idioma anterior. Observação: o aplicativo Zoom deve ter sido baixado previamente para ter a opção Interpretação disponível.
Obrigada.
De nada.
Interprétation simultanée sur Zoom, version PC, étape 1. Dans le menu du bas, sélectionnez la fonction Interprétation. Étape 2. Sélectionnez la langue dans laquelle vous souhaitez écouter la réunion. Cette langue doit être la même que celle dans laquelle vous allez parler. Remarque, si vous souhaitez changer de langue, vous devez simplement accéder à la fonction Interprétation et sélectionner une autre. Rappelez-vous que lorsque vous changez de langue, vous n'entendrez plus la précédente. Remarque, l'application Zoom doit être été préalablement téléchargée pour que les options d'interprétation soient disponibles.
Merci. So we will just enable the interpretation now. Is everyone able to join the channels that you are selecting? If not, let us know. Let's just check. All good with the translations? Okay, so we always like to start with an acknowledgement of elders and territories. So I would like to take some time to acknowledge past, present, and emerging traditional and indigenous custodians, elders, and ancestral spirits of the territories where we live and work. Great. So I will stop sharing now and I will pass on the word to our keynote speakers. So today we have a wonderful keynote talk about the increasing recognition of barriers to family planning as a conservation issue. And this talk is being provided by the Margaret Pyke Trust, by the International Crane Foundation, the Durrell Wildlife Conservation Trust, the Rugarama Hospital, the Medical Research Council, Uganda Virus Research Institute, and London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicines Uganda Research Unit. And we are very grateful to all of you. So our first speaker is Rumbi Gumbi. So Rumbi is a registered nurse. She works with the Margaret Pyke Trust, and she focuses on connecting human and environmental health aspects. And she also is very engaged in advocacy. So recently she contributed to a campaign where they redirected climate funding to remove barriers to family planning and the education of girls. And she collaborated with 60 nonprofit organizations on this. She is a member of CEESP and co-chairs the IUCN Biodiversity and Family Planning Task Force. Please help me to welcome Rumbi, who will be presenting first, and she will introduce the next speakers. And we will have some time at the end for questions and answers. So jot down your questions and we will take care of you later. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina, and thank you to CCNet for inviting us. As Christina said, my name is Rumbi. I'm the Population Health and Environment Manager at Margaret Pyke Trust. We're delighted to be here to share our project and information with you. We have 8 fantastic speakers. No one is going to speak more than 5 minutes. And as mentioned by Christina, there'll be a Q&A at the end. During my very short presentation, I'm going to give you a general overview of population health and environment programs. I'll explain how there's a growing recognition globally as to the benefit of these projects, and that's both for people and for biodiversity. So population health and environment, known as PHE, is an approach that recognizes the link between people and their environment. The PHE approach to community development aims to improve access to primary healthcare services, particularly family planning and reproductive health, while helping communities conserve biodiversity, manage natural resources, and develop sustainable livelihoods. So as you can see from the slides, there is an increasingly popular conservation approach that helps communities conserve biodiversity, and these projects are span across the world. I'm going to talk about one example though, which is a PHE project that is the Blue Ventures Community Health Program in Madagascar, known as SAFIDI, which means choice. It was launched over 10 years ago and serves more than 45,000 people in a local area where there was an identified need for health services. Conservationists at Blue Ventures work to design, scale, strengthen, and sustain fisheries management and governance at the community level. The SAFIDI program ensures that community health workers are trained to offer community-based family planning and other health services too. So you can see that in this picture, it shows a fisherwoman who is able to carry out her livelihoods thanks to the SAFIDI program. But I'm going to stop my talk there so I can give you a chance to hear more in depth on the program that we run in Uganda from our other speakers. I'm going to introduce you to Muhumuza Richard, our project social scientist team leader from the Medical Research Council, Uganda Virus Research Institute, and the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine's Uganda Research Unit. Richard is going to speak about his research work on the perceptions of people living in the Rukiga district and the connections between their health, livelihoods, and environmental challenges. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Rumbi, and I'm glad to be here. I'm going to take you through a qualitative research that we did to support the program, and I work with Medical Research Council, which came on board to help with this research. Next. Yeah, we started data collection between April and June 2021, where we were collecting both key informant interviews and focus group discussions to get people's perceptions and to understand the problems that these people are facing. And in total, we did 28 focus group discussions and 40 key informant interviews. Next. Yeah, so it's the summary of our findings. We looked at both environmental challenges, where the community said that there were changing and unpredictable seasons, where the rains would come too much at the time they are not expected, and also soil erosion, deforestation as an environmental challenge. And as you can see in the picture in the slides, it shows soil erosion washing away one of the highways in one of the communities that we worked in. Next, please. Yeah, and also they also talked about health challenges that are related to malnutrition caused by inadequate food, then inadequate health services, family planning issues, alcoholism, and domestic violence. And in the photo here, this is one of the community health centers that serves more than 13 villages in one of the communities where this research took place. Next, please. We now looked at the connections that the community drew from the challenges they face, and they realized that wetland health and human health were deeply connected because one affected the other in a way that whenever people encroached on the wetlands, for example, all the animals that stay in the wetlands would move now to people's homes, and they end up causing problems, which was not good. Next slide. Yeah, also inadequate family planning services were also connected to reduced available land, whereby land was now cut into small pieces, because as people produce many children, there comes a time when they have to give them land to settle with their families. This leading to small plots of land that in end cannot sufficiently provide food for these people. Next slide, please. Yeah, and also they realized that old methods of soil protection, including the traditional napier grass on the hill slopes, have been forgotten, and this facilitates soil erosion and flooding when it is rainy season. So this was a connection that the community was able to talk about. Next, please. Yeah, and in conclusion, we realized that the people really understood the interconnectedness of their challenges between livelihoods, and environment and health. So the next steps for the research team to work with the implementing partners on how to tailor their messages and interventions to respond to these interconnected challenges, to address them in a holistic way. This photo, we look at the terrain of one of the communities where this research took place. I will now hand over to Dr. Dalbert, who is the International Crane Foundation's East African Regional Manager, who is going to inform us on our project conservation context in Rukiga district. Thank you very much. Dr. Dalbert.
Thank you very much, Richard. As Richard has mentioned, I work for the International Crane Foundation and the Endangered Wildlife Trust partnership, which conserves cranes across Africa. But today I'll talk about our work in southwestern Uganda, where the partnership has been working for the last 20 years. And in southwestern Uganda, we basically work around Rushebe Kanyawaha wetland in Rukiga district. Please, next slide. This is the wetland around which Richard and his team did the study. So all he has mentioned was done around in the catchment of this wetland. And this is one of the key crane strongholds in Uganda. And there are other biodiversity like the yellow swamp warbler, the famous tatunga, which is a wetland antelope. So there is a lot of biodiversity here of various conservation statuses, and therefore it is really a key habitat, but also a key wetland that supports human activities by providing ecosystem services. But on the economic front, it also supplies water to a nearby hydropower plant, which supplies power to a health facility that supports over 3 million people, and that is Seas Hospital. Next slide. Of course, this wetland, as I mentioned, supports a large number of gray-crowned cranes, which are, of course, endangered by IUCN status. Unfortunately, there is a lot of encroachment on this wetland from surrounding communities. This affects the breeding sites for cranes. This particular crane only breeds in wetlands. And so when agriculture is expanded in, it means that cranes and people are competing for the same space. Next slide. But also we know that one of the key functions of wetlands is really filtering water to provide clean water for communities. Now, the communities around this wetland, 100% depend on water from wetlands. Unfortunately, the unsustainable activities, especially agricultural activities, both on the hill slopes and in the wetlands, have affected the quality of water that these people can access. But because there is no alternative, they have no choice. They have to fetch this water in whatever form it is, which of course poses health threats on the side of the communities. But also when people come in to fetch water here, some of them disturb breeding cranes. So it also becomes a threat in a way to cranes. Next. So the big question here is, why are people expanding agriculture in wetlands? One of the key reasons is that there are large families in this area, and traditionally in Uganda, families subdivide land and distribute it amongst their children. And because this has been done over generations, you find that most families no longer have enough land to produce adequate food to feed their families. And because of this land scarcity, they resort to expanding agriculture to wetlands, which they perceive as free land. Unfortunately, this is where cranes can only breed, and therefore, this expansion of agriculture means a reduction in the available wetland available for cranes to breed. And in the long run, this affects the breeding success of cranes and ultimately impacts on their population. Now, the other factor that forces people into wetlands, of course, is low productivity on the hill slopes due to unsustainable agriculture, but also effects of climate change, which have tremendously reduced the crop yield on hill slopes due to long droughts. And because there is always water in the wetland, people tend to expand agriculture there. So we are working with partners to see how we can solve this problem that is largely driven by large families subdividing land and ending up not having sufficient land to produce enough food for their families. So we are working on our first project that really integrates conservation and family planning issues to find a solution to this problem. So I will now hand over to Wimba Sar, who is a registered nurse and also Margaret Pyke Trust's U-Shape manager. And Sar is going to talk to us about the human health context in the Rukiga district, which is the project site. So Sar, over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dalbert. Like he has said, I'm Wimba Sarah. I work with Margaret Pyke Trust and I'm in Uganda. Margaret Pyke Trust has worked in Uganda for over 5 years with the major aim of training health workers in family planning. So we train many health workers in several hospitals to ensure they are well skilled and they are knowledgeable in the provision of family planning services. Rugarama Hospital is one of the hospitals we are working with, and it's the hospital who are implementing the healthcare services in our project area in Rukiga district. So talking about family planning, it helps women and girls to choose the number and spacing of their children, which includes giving several methods that they use. And these we talk about modern methods of family planning. And here we have short-term methods such as pills, a pill which is taken every day, or condoms which they have to use every time. Or we offer long-term methods like intrauterine devices and implants, which implants inserted in the arm and IUDs inserted in the uterus. So these ones protect against pregnancy for years, and the woman is protected to get unplanned pregnancy. Family planning saves lives. It is one of the most effective and well-tested strategies for saving women's lives and children. When women have access to a range of modern family planning services, they can better avoid unintended pregnancies, and they can better space their pregnancies. So when we look into our project site, we find there are so many barriers to family planning, which hinder people from using the modern methods of contraceptives. And for example, here, the men can be a barrier. They are significant, a barrier to family planning in the project area. They might prevent their partners from accessing family planning. They might not know the family planning, that it can save lives, that it can make their lives easier. And they might not know the best timing of pregnancies. So men often stop their women from using household income to access the family planning services. So in the project area, there are so many myths and misconceptions, and not only there, also in the rest of places in Uganda. For example, some people think that condoms can cause cancer, or if you have sexual standing up, you cannot get pregnant, All these are not true, but people strongly hold to them like they are true. Others believe that long-term methods, if inserted in a woman, like IUD or implant, they can travel around the body and cause mental illnesses. These are also not true. And this is why we strongly need to educate people about family planning. So having worked as a nurse for about 15 years, I have experienced that it is so difficult for health workers to access good family planning trainings. So they find it so easy to give some methods which are so simple to give and so easy to administer. So when a woman comes, or a man, when they come to family planning, for some family planning services, they try to encourage them to take the methods to their convenience because they are not well skilled in providing most of the methods available. So this is why we need to train so many health workers such that when a client comes to them, has a right to access any form of family planning service. So family planning helps women to also have freedom to do rest of the work and be productive in other ways and earn a living for the family and for themselves. Thank you so much. I'll now hand over back to Dr. Adalbert as he takes us through the project's conservation actions.
Thank you very much, Sarah. As you must have heard, there are so many threats to cranes, and our conservation actions and strategies aim at solving these threats. Now, one of our key strategies is to engage community members in direct crane conservation. And we have recruited and trained community volunteer members that we call crane custodians. And these help safeguard cranes, especially when they are sitting on their nests during the breeding season, when the fragile chicks are hatched, until they are able to fly and move away from trouble. So these community members are volunteers and they don't earn a salary. We only support them with gadgets like gumboots, smartphones to collect data and a few protective gear, but they are essentially volunteers. And they don't only safeguard cranes, and I request we move to the next slide. They also help in sensitizing communities about the value of wetlands. And as we know, one of the values of wetlands is really filtering water. Rukiga is a hill area, and there is a lot of soil erosion that carries a lot of sediments from the hills and deposits into wetlands in streams. And the water ends up being highly turbid. So when vegetation is removed, of course, then that value is lost. So we work with these custodians using water clarity tests, show them how wetland vegetation is able to filter water and provide clean water. And where there is no vegetation, we show them how deposition of soil and other pollutants affect water quality. And these custodians are able to use the results of these water clarity tests to raise awareness in their communities about the value that wetlands provide and how these directly link to their livelihood and their health. They also monitor cranes and report incidents. We've provided them with smartphones that have Survey 123 application, and they are able to record where they have seen cranes, where they have seen a nest, how many eggs are on a nest. They're also able to report crane incidents like collisions with power lines, or where when there is poisoning, they're able to capture all this data and send it to our remote servers, and our project staff are able to analyze and make use of this data. Next. Next, please. We also have run awareness campaigns, sometimes done directly by project staff, but also these community members that we work with. Because of COVID-19, we've changed our strategy. In the past, we used to gather community members and pass on our conservation messages. But now, because of COVID restrictions, we've resorted to use of mobile vans, where we play music related to wetland and crane conservation, and music that is locally composed by community members and therefore in local language. And using this, we are able to pass out messages promoting conservation of wetlands, promoting sustainable agriculture on hill slopes, and also explaining to communities why they need to conserve cranes and wetlands. Next. We also support alternative livelihoods. As you've heard from Richard's presentation, communities expand agriculture into wetlands because they want to put food on the table. And therefore, if you want them to reduce their pressure on wetlands, you need to support them with alternative livelihoods. And this is what we are doing in our project. So we give them, we sit with them and identify alternative sustainable livelihoods that can help them put food on the table without expanding agriculture into wetlands, but also agreeing with them to leave wetland stretches where cranes can breed, and stretches that can also filter water that comes from the hill slopes, so that they're able to access clean water in the stream. So in this picture, we gave them Irish potato planting materials, climbing beans, supported them with fertilizers. Next, and also we provided them with spray pumps. Because of the changes in the weather conditions, communities are beginning to see so many pests. So we gave them spray pumps to deal with that. But also, because this is a hill area and there is a lot of erosion, which ultimately brings sedimentation into wetlands, we are working with communities to reduce erosion on hill slopes. Next slide. And we are doing this by providing communities with napier grass. This is an indigenous species, not an invasive species, which they plant on hill slopes to reduce erosion. But also, this napier again provides fodder for livestock, which livestock eventually helps these communities to generate income. Now, all these livelihood interventions are given in exchange for communities committing to undertake conservation actions, including raising awareness about crane and wetland conservation, restoring degraded wetland parts, leaving stretches for wetlands to establish so that cranes can breed, and also, planting this napier grass so that ultimately they reduce erosion. So these are some of the key interventions we are implementing to reduce threats to cranes, but also to make sure that communities have sustainable livelihoods. So at this juncture, I will introduce Dr. Gilbert Mateka, who is the medical director at Rugarama Hospital. Gilbert will talk to you about the project's human health actions. Over to you, Gilbert.
Thank you, Dr. Dalbert and colleagues and participants. Our project healthcare actions have been designed to respond to the many barriers, as mentioned by Sarah, that prevent women and girls from accessing family planning services. We started by training healthcare workers in family planning skills in 9 health facilities, and to ensure project sustainability, we chose to strengthen a range of government and non-profit centers. The family planning training program that we use was designed by Sarah and colleagues at Margaret Pyke Trust over several years, and it specifically addresses particular health needs in the region. We started by training because, again, as mentioned, one of the biggest issues reported in our research was that most health workers lacked the knowledge, skills, and confidence to provide a full range of quite a family planning services. And therefore, the training that has been designed helps the health workers in 3 main areas. And that is, the first one is to help them know how to provide all 11 contraceptive methods. And number 2 is support them to know how to help a client choose the best contraceptive method appropriate for them. And number 3, we help the health workers to know how to conduct community family planning talks to help raise awareness of the importance of family planning, and also to reduce the myths and misconceptions, as mentioned by Sarah. There are many myths and misconceptions held by the people. And by doing this, we reach even the vulnerable population, such as the young ones. Our nurses use a variety of ways to engage the communities with health messages. For example, we do radio broadcast. We also conduct health education talks while we're doing outreaches, and also work with village health teams. These are community resource persons who, because they live in the communities, they understand the way of life of the people, they know the myths, and they know how to address them. So work so much with them to mobilize the communities for uptake of family planning. In addition to this, to be able to reach the community with family planning methods, we conduct integrated community outreach clinics. On these clinics, we offer a wide range of health services, and as men and youth come for these other health services, they are reached with family planning messages and methods. We also work with churches and community established groups. In the churches, we work with Fathers Union, Mothers Union, and in the communities, we work with village saving schemes to be able to reach out to the communities. And we also have engaged health workers and trained them such that we can increase family planning conversations on all available platforms. Of the 9 health centers that we are supporting in our project area, only 2 before the project were providing just 2 short-term family planning methods, and the other 7 will hardly provide anything for the clients. And this meant that a woman would travel long distance and journey on to the facility, but they will not find anyone there to provide them with health family planning needs. And already with our project, we have started to notice increase in demand for family planning services, especially in the areas that are around our project area. They are requesting if we can extend services to them. And the other day I was excited when I got a phone call from one man who called asking whether it was necessary for him to travel with his wife to the hospital to consent for family planning, or whether it was okay for his wife to come alone, whether we could accept to give her the service. It's changes like these that encourage us and that we would like to see more of them, to change men from becoming barriers, in any case to be supporting their wives to take up these family planning services. At this point, you allow me to invite Kat Lloyd, who is Margaret Pyke Trust Senior Manager. She'll be telling us about our project's integrated design. Kat.
Thanks, Gilbert. So you've heard about the environmental and health issues that our project communities are facing. So I wanted to talk to you about how we've designed our project to respond to these issues. So Rukiga's wetlands are under increasing pressures caused by a growing human population. And Rukiga's communities depend on healthy wetlands for their livelihoods, just as the cranes depend on healthy wetlands for their nests. So when there are barriers to family planning, it means that couples can't choose freely whether and when to have children, which leads to increases in unintended pregnancies and larger families than would otherwise be the case, as well as many other negative health outcomes. So, as Richard explained, our research shows that women in Rukiga are having more children than they would like to have. It also shows that they have a finite amount of land on which to grow their crops. And as their families grow, it becomes harder for them to support their needs. If we were able to remove all barriers to family planning, everyone would be able to choose freely whether and when to have children, which would reduce some of the pressures on families and the wetlands. Our project communities have asked for better health services, including family planning, as they themselves have made the connection between family health, family size, and their ability to support their family. So why integrate? There are many benefits of partners from different sectors working together. Health workers often want to engage men, and conservationists often want to engage women. So by delivering health and livelihood messages together in the same session, both men and women hear messages that they might not have traditionally heard before. And this benefits both conservation and health outcomes. So I can give you 6 examples of how we're doing this. So as Dr. Gilbert mentioned just now, we're working in churches. So we use churches as a platform to share messages on our project areas. So here nurses stand alongside wetland experts to share messages on conservation and healthcare at the same time. Similarly, we use loudspeakers in health centres, and ordinarily these messages shared on loudspeakers would only be on healthcare, but we've integrated conservation and livelihood messages too. The third example is we undertake male engagement. So here we host men-only events where we share messages on livelihood and conservation, but we also take the opportunity to share messages on family planning. But these messages are particularly important, these meetings are particularly important because Sarah mentioned earlier, men are a significant barrier to women accessing family planning. And in a patriarchal society, as is the case in Rukiga, it's quite frankly unsurprising that men don't see it as being relevant to them to attend a training session on healthy timing and spacing of pregnancies. And similarly, we engage women's groups, and this is to share messages on family planning, but we also use it as an opportunity to share messages on conservation and livelihoods too. And this is also important because often women are far less likely to go to a talk on conservation or livelihoods because it's often seen as a male activity. So the 5th example I wanted to share is a one-day festival. So this is where community members are invited to really celebrate their wetlands and cranes, and they also hear health messages. They can even visit a pop-up clinic for healthcare services, including family planning, if they wish. And finally, we work in schools. So as I'm sure you're all aware, children are excellent agents of change. So we use a variety of fun activities to get children really enthusiastic about their wetlands and cranes. And we also share messages about how the wetlands help to keep them healthy. So as you can see, our activities aren't particularly unusual, but what I'd say is what's different is in the way in which we share our messages, our health and conservation messages. Every time we engage community members, it's an opportunity for us to share our project messages to ensure we reach as many people as possible. So on a more practical side, there's also cost-saving benefits too of project partners working together. So for example, we share project vehicle and office space, which helps to reduce travel and rent costs. So to sum up, people and their environment are undoubtedly linked. And this is also what our project communities have told us. So to better support them, our project provides a holistic package to respond to the interconnected conservation and human health issues they're facing. So I'd like to now introduce Claire Railton, who is the Conservation Effectiveness Officer at the Durrell Wildlife Conservation Trust. She's been supporting us to integrate our project's data within the Conservation Measures Partnership. Thanks, Claire.
Thanks so much, Kat. So I'm going to be talking about how this project fits into our PHE learning initiative, which seeks to understand and advance the use of integrated reproductive health and conservation approaches. This learning initiative actually started at the beginning of last year, and we advanced our proposal into 2021. So we are currently wrapping up our final results and resources. Next slide, please, Kat. Our team consists of 4 facilitators, but over 29 key experts from the human and reproductive health sector. And together, we aim to improve CMPs and more broadly, the conservation sector's understanding of these integrated approaches and their value to biodiversity conservation. We're identifying some of the challenges that prevent the uptake of these types of approaches, and we're recommending actions that both the health and the conservation communities can take to address those challenges. And we aim to share this learning as widely as possible through global forums. Next slide, please. So we've developed a clear definition for PHE and what it means to the conservation sector. We've also developed a series of generic theories of change to help practitioners understand and adapt integrated reproductive health and conservation strategies for their particular project context. We're using these real-world case studies, such as this one described today, to test our assumptions that we made in our generic models. And we aim to share this learning through online forums, presentations, reports, publications. They're all coming out hopefully quite soon. And we're also consolidating some of the resources that already exist in a freely available resource library. Next slide, please. So again, don't worry too much about the details on this slide. This is just an example of one of our theories of change, which lays out the assumptions for how an integrated reproductive health, family planning, and conservation approach is likely to lead to simultaneous benefits to both local biodiversity and human well-being. And as I mentioned, we're also including case study specific theories of change, which highlight some of the key differences and characteristics that might exist within specific project contexts, as well as those key measures of success for that real world example. Next slide, please. So with in-depth knowledge of how this project is playing out in reality, we are refining these generic models. We're identifying key actions, key measures of success that we need teams to integrate. And we're learning how these teams can address obstacles and support the uptake of PHE approaches, just like this one. And next slide, please. All of our models, so our generic models, as well as these case study specific theories of change, will all be available in the Conservation Actions and Measures Library, which, as you know, is an open source library of results chains containing some of the most common conservation strategies. Sorry, my dog is sneezing a lot behind me. As we're facing this sort of escalating global human and biodiversity and climate crisis at the moment, we really don't have the time to be working in our isolated sectors and silos. So it's only if we learn from our mistakes as well as the mistakes of others, and we address these things simultaneously, will we really have the impact that we need. Next slide. So we would really like to encourage your participation in this initiative. Firstly, if you have any experience with PHE projects, you have the opportunity to review and provide some comments on our resources and the models we've already created. And secondly, we urge you to promote and publicize this work by sharing our resources and outputs widely among your networks and participating in our outreach events. And final slide, thanks. So that's all from me. If you would like to find out more about this learning initiative, please feel free to get in touch if you would like to contribute. I'd now like to hand over to David Johnson. David is the Chief Executive at the Margaret Pyke Trust, and he's going to be providing information about the programmatic and policy actions that conservationists can undertake to support our approach.
Thanks a lot, Claire. I really appreciate it. Yeah, and greetings from Glasgow and COP26, where the Margaret Pyke Trust has been promoting the critical importance of removing barriers to family planning as part of climate adaptation and resilience building. And there is a growing move behind this sort of recognition of the connections between reproductive environmental health, not just at COP26 and in UNFCCC processes, but more broadly. It was actually almost a decade ago that the UN Environment Programme first started speaking about the connections in their 5th Global Environment Outlook, when they referred to girls' education and family planning as relevant to biodiversity. And more recently, actually this year in 2021, in the UNEP report, Making Peace with Nature, they made very similar points. But as well as UNEP, there's other alliances. It was in 2014 that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change recognised the importance of family planning. And that's really what we're trying to build on in Glasgow at COP, because we'd like to open up climate adaptation funding to also respond to barriers to family planning. I suspect a lot of you will have heard that in the run-up to COP, there's been a lot of focus on this targeted $100 billion of funding that wealthy countries are hopefully going to commit to spend per annum to help low-income countries respond to the climate challenges that they face. Now, one of the things we've been calling for at COP is, interestingly, we would only need half of 1%, a measly half of 1% of that $100 billion per year, to be able to allow everybody who'd like to gain access to family planning to actually be able to use it. That's the sum of money we need to provide healthcare services to the women who want it, but currently aren't able to access it, including women at the front line of the climate crisis. But whilst the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and UNEP have started to get behind this agenda, on the next slide, we're moving on to the International Union for Conservation of Nature, because I think it's perhaps with IUCN that the most significant change has taken place in the last year. I think we need to reverse a slide. The Margaret Pyke Trust is the only member of IUCN with 50 years reproductive health and rights expertise. And that's the reason why we joined IUCN, was to promote this agenda. And in the run-up to World Conservation Congress, we built an alliance of organizations from around the world to table a motion that's titled "The Importance for the Conservation of Nature of Removing Barriers to Rights-Based and Voluntary Family Planning." Now at Congress, this motion passed with an absolute landslide, a landslide of governments and NGOs in every single IUCN region. And something we're particularly proud about is that of all of the Indigenous peoples organizations that chose to vote at Congress, 100% of them voted for this motion. So there actually is a lot of grassroots, governmental, NGO and global support for this agenda. Now, 6 weeks ago, the first significant action under the resolution happened when we launched the task force, the Biodiversity and Family Planning Task Force. And our members of the task force are looking at the next steps. Now, whether that is developing educational and learning materials to build the capacity and knowledge of conservation practitioners about reproductive health and rights and barriers to family planning, and how you could develop a PHE project, what the indicators are that you could include within that, or more broadly, the task force will be running for 2 IUCN quadrennial periods to actually bring greater health knowledge into the conservation sector. So next slide, please, though. Because one of the other actions that the task force wants to work focus on also reflects some of the work that we're undertaking at COP26. Because whether we're looking at national plans, like national adaptation plans under UNFCCC processes, or if it's the national plans under the Convention on Biological Diversity, the national plans are very siloed. It's something Claire spoke about just now, the silos between sectors. And unsurprisingly, it's ministries of finance and ministries of environment that are involved in these national planning processes, but they're not reaching out to ministries of education and ministries of health. So the national plans have an absence of looking at the importance of removing barriers to family planning and barriers to girls' education as part of broader conservation policy. So it's a big call that we've got at COP, and it would be interesting to see if there are people on this call actually that were involved in national planning processes wherever you are based, as you could potentially be an avenue for us to further work in this sector. So to conclude on the final slide, really, there's some key things that we need to do. We need to move on from a siloed sectoral approach and actually learn more about each other's sectors. And in many ways, actually, this event today is part of that. We're calling for a broader alliance of organisations to be involved in national planning processes. So barriers to family planning, barriers to girls' education can actually be brought into national plans under climate and biodiversity processes. And of course, we need to make changes to funding. Just like the call at the moment at COP to open up adaptation funding to benefit women and girls, we also need funding that supports these integrated projects, because it's very unusual to get donors that actually understand the more holistic nature of these projects, and how we need donors to actually support the full range of work rather than just focusing on the conservation or just on the health outcomes. So on behalf of all the speakers, thank you very much for listening to us, but we were very keen to have some questions. But we've noticed that so far we haven't had any questions in the chat. So I'm going to pose a couple of questions to some of my fellow panelists and hope that maybe in the next couple of minutes we'll have another couple of questions through. And it will be the same question actually, which I'm going to direct at Adalbert and Gilbert. So kind of lead conservation and health practitioners, and recognizing that it is perhaps unusual at the moment for these projects to be developed with sectors working together. I'd be interested to hear Adalbert's views on what it's actually been like for him as a conservation practitioner and a conservation NGO working with a hospital and learning about family planning. And then actually maybe after that we could hear from Gilbert from a similar perspective, from a medical superintendent of a hospital, what it's been like working with a conservation organisation. Adalbert.
Thanks, Richard. David, sorry, it's been, I should say, very exciting to work with the hospital. One of the key issues we struggle with in the conservation sector is to bring women into the discussion. And on the health side of things, women, I think that's their thing. They easily go for health care. So to me, working with the hospital has really given us an opportunity to easily meet women when we want them. So it's something that has really made our life very easy. When we want women, we get them, because when we move with Rugarama Hospital, we are sure we are going to find as many women as we want. So that has been really one thing that is exciting about this program. The other exciting thing is really how this project is helping people to make connections between their health and the health of the environment. Now, one of the challenges we are trying to deal with in Rukiga is soil erosion, which deposits a lot of soil and other pollutants into wetlands. And it is from these wetlands that communities fetch water. So, and when they fetch this and polluted water, they end up with health problems. So when we are in our conservation meetings and we talk about planting napier grass on hill slopes to reduce erosion, and how ultimately this will help communities get clean water. And then when the health practitioners come in and talk about the water-borne diseases, then the communities tend to easily see the connection between poorly utilized hill slopes leading to erosion, and how this contaminates the water, and how they will fall sick when they use this water. So communities are able to make sense and therefore appreciate the role of conservation in their livelihood. So to me, it is exciting, and I think that's the way to go. Thank you, David.
Thanks. Maybe Gilbert can respond then from his perspective and the hospital's perspective. Gilbert?
You're on mute, Gilbert.
Yeah, thank you. My internet had gone off, but I'm glad to be back. And the question of how it has been working with the conservation, it's like he has mentioned, the connections. It's now, it doesn't take much to explain to our clients the connection between their family size, what it has to do with even their land and other things. So it's easy for them to understand better now. Initially, standing alone and working in isolation, some concepts were difficult for them to understand, but now it comes very easy. And leave alone the communities, even the health workers, they are a bit excited about environmental topics now than they were before. The connections kind of cause them to feel they have a role to play, even on the other side in the conservation of the wetlands. So the interconnections are quite very interesting and exciting. And personally, yeah, I've been in this region, I've seen the cranes since I was a kid, but these days I'm more excited about seeing these cranes and the wetlands. So I think the connections bring something exciting about the working in the context, working around the context, not as.
It's great. I think I might have lost Gilbert there. I don't know if anyone else has.
Yeah, he's frozen.
Yeah. But we have had a question in the chat, which maybe should be sent to Kat. The question was whether there's interest and expectations by communities in the area to cater for other health needs like malaria, malnutrition, or COVID.
Thanks, David. And yeah, thanks for the question. There was, and actually this is why the research that Richard was leading on was so useful, because there's a range of health issues, as they mentioned, but Rugarama Hospital, they're not just providing family planning services, they're providing a range of healthcare services. So the health centre provides child services, maternal services, general healthcare. And you know, you mentioned malaria. Malaria obviously is a big issue in the region, with it being a wetland. And with malnutrition, it's one of the things that we're able to address through our project messaging around nutrition. We're providing information about what a kind of healthy nutrition looks like, and also how they can grow certain crops to help with their nutrition. Also, we've identified some interesting local health issues that actually we were in discussion with the London School that we'd not heard before. It's a concern around snails making a certain illness, which is actually something that we're going to look into. So it's really been a really great piece of research that's uncovered lots of different health issues that we're able to address through Rugarama Hospital.
Thanks, Kat. Harriet's asked a question as well. How much buy-in has there been from local government structures, and how easy do you think it will be to sustain the integrated programme in the long term once donor funding dries up? Well, we shouldn't assume donor funding is going to dry up. That's one of the things that's at the top of my priority list, including what I've been doing in Glasgow. But maybe for the local government structures, is that something, Sarah, you might want to respond to? Sarah and Adelbert, perhaps?
This is something we thought about when we were starting to implement these services in the community. So we try to identify the government facilities, and we are trying to empower them. We have taken them through trainings, and more trainings are yet to be given to them. And our aim is looking at sustainability. What will happen in case the donation is not there? And people are taking it up well. The facilities are now improving, and the communities are being helped. So I think this is something that the project has already taken care of. Thank you.
Sorry, Adelbert, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. To add to that is our entry point at communities is always the local government. So we engaged them right from the start, and they have been very supportive to a level that the lowest unit of government, which is the local council one, is willing to form even wetland management committees that will formulate bylaws that will govern sustainable use of wetlands beyond the life of this project. So the buy-in has been really good and the support is there, and the structures they are putting in place through the local government structure will sustain this work beyond the life of the project. But also at district level, we are working with the Natural Resources Department to integrate our work into their planning, their local government plans, so that it becomes part and parcel of the work of the Natural Resources Department. So yeah, the buy-in is there, and we are confident that this will go on even before, beyond the life of the project.
Yeah. There's also a question from Marcia referring to USAID, which is right. So USAID has been funding population health environment programs longer than any of the large donors. There's some of the large US sort of family foundations like Packard that have funded PHE projects in the past, but that's sort of fallen away. So the question was actually if there's any other international donors that are moving in this direction. I think the honest answer to that is that we need larger donors like USAID that could do this really at scale. But whereas there's and that's not necessarily happening, but there is a growing number of family foundations that are interested, and it's actually something that's come up in discussions with donors at COP. So I think there is movement among those kind of large foundations, but not at the size of USAID. However, one thing that's worthy of note is we haven't actually given a call out to the donor for the work at in Rukiga, which is DEFRA, the UK's Department for Environment, under the Darwin Initiative, and they had never funded anything like this before. The Darwin Initiative was set up originally in 1992 at the Rio Earth Summit, and ever since it's been the UK government's sort of landmark biodiversity funding mechanism. And so they've funded tens of millions of pounds worth of projects over the last couple of decades. And this is the first time they've ever supported a project that actually covers the costs of reproductive health services and health training. And our expectation is that one donor, this is probably, our projects has probably opened up the possibility of funding from later DEFRA projects, because it's got a lot of positive publicity and it started. But to be honest, it's not like we can say that, yes, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation are now supporting this. So the big donors aren't making the leap yet. Doug has asked a question about patriarchal systems and if there's any interest in changing that system to achieve greater equity in general, i.e. empowering women to have a greater voice in decisions beyond personal and family health. I have an answer to that, but I think I ought to pass that to others in the team. I'm thinking, Sarah, you might be able to, I was thinking of some of like some of the community education groups. Is that something you'd be happy to answer, Sarah?
Yes, somehow we are trying to empower these women. When we do community education, we are encouraging them to be productive in some ways. Some women have decided to form like village saving groups where we meet and educate them. And this is empowering them to be more productive in many other ways. And they also form other groups where they do and earn more and their voice is heard. So there are many ways we try to approach these women and make sure it's not just about their family, it's about the community and them their voice being heard. Maybe if someone else, maybe Dr. Gilbert, if you have something to add on that, but that's what I see we are doing with our community women.
Yeah, maybe I can go first, Sarah. Thank you very much for that contribution. Through our research, we are able to find out that actually in these communities, there are groups that are actually headed by the females, and these groups or saving groups, they help communities to, one, in agriculture and also increasing household incomes. So that one is something that is in the community, but it needs to be reinforced because most of them really are struggling with the few resources, but at least they are doing something, not only to have their household incomes increased, but also to develop generally. So maybe Dr. Adalbert or Gilbert, if you have something to add from your work.
If not, I think we actually only have so much time for questions left. So Leander has done the R to raise hand, but also added the question. So the question, which I assume is the same one, is to provide tips on conservation and equity groups that might be hesitant to work outside their silo. Should we start with values, funding opportunities, shared goals? I mean, I think what we're trying to do is different approaches for different organizations. When you actually get around to developing a project, you'd certainly have to have sort of values clarification. We'd agree key messages to make sure that everyone was aware of the views and aims of the organizations. But funding opportunities is relevant. But then I think also from the conservation side, we're seeing a lot of conservation organizations wanting to get involved in this. Conservation organizations actually wanting to do greater work empowering their communities. And Rich has just spoken, highlighting about the research that was undertaken about what the community wanted. And actually, this is all responding to the research of the community saying we want greater health services that was as part of this. So I suppose there's a range. For some people, it might be a funding opportunity. Others, it might be responding to what the community have said. And also, I think we all feel that this is part of a 21st century approach to conservation, actually being more people-centric. So hopefully that's answered that question. Anne, oh no, sorry, actually there was a question that I should have sent to Adalbert, wasn't there? Adalbert, so maybe you can highlight about whether there's been any noticeable changes yet in crane population sightings.
Thank you. I wouldn't say the changes we are seeing now would be attributed, the population changes would be attributed to this particular project, but we've seen people responding positively to the messages that we give. For instance, when we educate them about living wetland patches, communities have come forward and agreed to leave wetland patches to establish for cranes to breed. And we have also seen a huge response in communities taking up the planting of napier to prevent erosion. And we know that in the near future, this is going to hugely help reduce the sedimentation of wetlands, which will significantly, of course, improve the health of the wetland and provide healthy wetlands for cranes to breed. But also, we've seen a change now in the number of cranes that are breeding. And this, we think, is because communities are beginning to allow wetlands to establish where they were previously not because of agriculture, and therefore cranes have space to build their nests. So we started monitoring 11 pairs. We have now gone to over 20 pairs that are nesting. So we think this is because communities have accepted to let the wetland reestablish. So we think over the years we are going to see huge impact. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think in conclusion, it's the same with reproductive health and public health, because this is a long-term endeavor, because these projects take a long time to improve both human and environmental health. But we are at 20 past, so I know I need to hand back to Christina. But what I would say is that we haven't responded to Musi Zenab's question, who raised a hand. So actually, if you type that in the chat, I will make sure we respond to that whilst Christina's wrapping up. But on behalf of all the speakers, huge thanks for allowing us to actually speak to you today. But yeah, thank you. And we should hand back to Christina 1 minute over time.
Thank you, David, and thank you to all of our presenters. Thank you, Rumbi and Adalbert and Sarah and Richard and Gilbert and Kat and Claire. It has been wonderful to learn from you. Thank you for being so generous with our Conservation Coaches Network community. So we were thinking if you all agree, we could turn on our cameras and take a group photo as we would if we were all in person. We usually do this after our plenary. So Anita and Claire are going to help me. We have 3 pages, so we just need to be a little patient, but put on your best smiles. And let's do this, and then we will move to some closing remarks. So 1, 2, 3. Okay, next page. 1, 2, 3. And the next
we need some
page.
more cameras, Christina.
Yes, we are missing some. Some are the translators, so they may be excused of turning on their camera. Okay, our camera's coming on. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Thank you. So I will go back to sharing my screen very briefly.
All right.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Great. All right, so we are reaching the end of our session today, and Jacqueline is going to share some good news with us from the Conservation Measures Partnership.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to give an update. If you were at the opening plenary or if you've been following along on the CCNet serve over the past month, we've had a great video viewing contest that's been happening. So earlier in 2021, the Conservation Measures Partnership released a series of testimonial videos where we had quite a large handful of organizations who did interviews, and we had some help from Justin Grubb to create these amazing series. So I'll put the link in the chat for that, but just wanted to first off give a shout out to all of the organizations and those who helped with the testimonial videos. So you can see some of the organizations represented on the slide here. Thanks, Caroline, for putting that in the chat. If you haven't watched the videos, like I said, they're really wonderful. So please, please check them out. So again, we wanted to just make sure to spread these videos as wide and far as possible, and had a little bit of a competition to see which video could get the most views just in kind of a 4-week period. So we had over 1,500 views among this series in that 4 weeks. So that was pretty amazing. And we've continued to see the increase just in this past week or so. We had some great prizes that our 2 organizations who have won can choose from, including some trainings as well as possible travel support. So I'll talk about that briefly. But the award for the most views, thank you, Christina, goes to International Crane Foundation, and then a joint video from World Wildlife Fund and the Nature Conservancy Mongolia. So thank you to those organizations for volunteering your time to create these videos. Thank you to Rich Felthus at ICF for speaking in the video, as well as Munchalan and Tugi in the WWF and TNC video in Mongolia. They were great collaborative pieces, and we're very excited to get in touch with you again about your prize coming your way. Christine, if you want to jump to the next slide. I just want to thank our supporters and those who have worked with us to provide either training opportunities for these organizations to choose from, as well as we had Marathi subscriptions donated. The Conservation Measures Partnership is willing to support some of these trainings, or even travel stipends to the next CCNet Rally or CMP get together. So thanks to everyone. Thanks to everyone on the Conservation Standards Promotion team who helped organize this. And we have more videos coming your way. So if you want to be a part of that, or if you want your organization to have their own testimonial video, please reach out to Caroline or get in touch with someone at
Great.
CMP.
Thank you, Jacqueline, and congratulations to the winners.
Thanks so much, Christina.
So before we all leave,
I think Christina's on mute.
I think she's frozen. Christina, if you can hear us.
Our fearless leader. Is there anybody else from the rally planning team who could step in?
Yep, maybe John, do you want to wrap up? Or somebody else?
I can try. I don't know what Christina's agenda was.
Let's adapt.
Was anyone else part of the design of the session?
I do have the agenda up if you'd like.
I do have the presentation. I have Christina's presentation. She said I wouldn't need it, but she sent it to me anyway. So let me pull that up.
Good.
Glad we have a plan B.
Hang on a moment.
You're a lifesaver, Claire.
If I can find it. Okie dokes, I've got it. Okay, so we were there.
Yeah.
So, John.
That's pretty straightforward. Let's see if we can. It would be great if somebody had the link.
We have the link. I'll put it in the chat.
Awesome. Thanks, Jacqueline. Because we do want to get everyone to evaluate this session, which was an amazing one. So if everyone would kindly fill in the evaluation, we would really appreciate it. And note that we still do have the community board. It's still there.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's not showing up on my
hello,
screen.
I'm back.
Oh, yay.
Oh, yay, Christina.
Technology, you never know, huh?
What a relief.
Claire, for sharing.
There we go. I'm sorry, it's not loading well on my computer, but I'll show you in this mode.
Yes.
That works. All right, Christina, back to you, but we have posted the evaluation link.
Excellent, thank you. And we also have a fun community board, so visit it. It's a place for us to get to know each other, to see where we are on the map. We have a timeline where you can follow what's going on in the program. We have a gratitude board where you can share some love for people who have done something that helped you. Maybe you have a book that really made a difference for you as a coach or a conservation practitioner. So check out the community board. And the next slide, please. Can you try in presentation mode and we see if it works?
It half works.
Thank you.
Sorry.
So I would like to thank the Rally 2021 planning team. It has been an awesome team of colleagues who have worked endless hours as volunteers to put this event together for our community. Next one, please.
Oh, there we go.
Also, our plenary speakers, thank you so much for your generosity. Next one. our session leaders. These are also people from all over the world sharing their experience and hosting these sessions for all of us. Next one. Of course, our donors who help us keep the lights on in CCNet. Next one. And you as participants, because this is a community effort. And so it's like cooking a fabulous dinner and then having people show up. So together we make this wonderful rally. And so thank you. And with this, we will close our plenary, but there are still a few sessions going on. So please check the rally website and register if you have not done so. And we hope to see as many of you as possible in 2022, where we hope to be able to meet in person. Thank you.